Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Maryland Apex Accelerator webinar. Glad you could join us today. Today's topic is, developing a winning cost proposal, and it is led by Akiesha Foster, who is the founder of KeyToLife Professional Services, LLC. We will get started very shortly, and there will be lots of opportunities for you to ask Akiesha your questions by typing them in the chat on your screen. We will pause for Q&A throughout the next 2 hours. As always, this is being recorded and a copy of the slides will be sent to you after the presentation is over. For those of you who are not familiar with the Maryland Apex Accelerator, it's our mission to help Maryland businesses compete in federal, state, and local government procurement processes. Our services are no cost to you. So if you would like to speak to a counselor, please register and complete the application form on our website, marylandapex.org. And it's usually about 30 business days before you can speak to a counselor, but sometimes we get to you a bit quicker than that. So thanks for your patience. All right, good morning, Akiesha. The floor's yours.
Thank you, Yasmin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to this series that we had. We started off with the intro to proposal writing, level 1. Then we dived into the proposal level 2. And today we're going over develop a winning cost proposal. Now, all this training is for our small businesses who are new to government contracting. Now, if you just need a refresher or anything, we definitely welcome you. But this training is designed for our small business new to government contracting, just getting started and building their foundation, because it is important that you build a strong foundation so that way you can succeed, especially with all of the different changes and things that are going on in the space. I am your instructor, and I've been in government contracting for over 22 years. Started off in acquisitions, started off in logistics supply, and then I moved over into acquisition. So I am a GovCon coach for some federal and a former contracting officer / specialist, and also a former Apex Accelerator counselor. So I know what it takes to win government contracting, having been in the weeds, learning all of the things that we need to be successful as small businesses. You can always feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and on YouTube, because I do many series. Because of these deep dives, we sometimes don't have the times to do the one-offs, like really focusing on a topic. So that's the reason why I created that additional resource, so that way it will supplement your training. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to do our poll. So what do you find to be the most challenging aspect of developing a cost proposal? Okay, why everyone getting that in? So what do you find the most some of you said uh accurately estimating direct costs. That's the labor and the materials, accounting for indirect costs. And then also, so it's pretty much even across the board. Everything that we're going to cover today is going to answer each and every one of these questions. It's just straight across the board. So thank you for letting me know, because it helps me to um customize the training as we go, to make sure everyone has their questions answered, and that way they leave here being able to implement. Okay, let me go to the next slide. Okay, today's training goal. Okay, so welcome everyone to this session. As I said earlier, this is for the small business wanting to break into government contracting. And so how you stay engaged today is make sure you ask those questions in the chat, because of those questions in the chat, Previously, when we gave this training, I have been able to modify the training and really expound on things that most of you had questions on. So that's what we use the chat for, to continue to improve the training. Okay, then make sure you take notes. So when you're taking notes, make sure you write the slide that you have the questions about, so that way when you receive the slides at the end of this session, you can just add those notes in there, because you're building your SOPs, your standard operating procedures. You're building things that you could use in your team meetings with your new employees or subcontractors, if anything. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use what you have until you can get more and better. So that's why we're always creating these templates, these products that you can use to grow your small business. All right. And then think about your own business every time we give an example. What you should be asking yourself, how does this apply to my small business? You're always asking those questions, and then take action. Every time we have a training, take action. The training isn't just about learning, it's also about doing. So, as soon as you get a concept, apply it, because if you don't apply it, I'm telling you, you'll lose it, and then you'll forget, and then it'll just start fading away. But immediately when you apply it, then it start clicking, and you understand. And then each session, like I said, if this is the first time you're attending this session and you did not attend the sessions, I recommend you go back and attend those sessions, the proposal level 1 and then the proposal level 2, which was last month, because those tie into this. Because today we're going to only focus on the cost proposal. So by the end of this session, my goal is for you to understand how to build that cost proposal, then translate how do you look at the scope of work, and then break it into the pricing structure and the labor estimates. That is mostly the main challenge most small businesses, is how do we translate? Basically, how do you translate the scope of work into a competitive, in compliance, because most of you, sometimes you bid too high and sometimes you bid too low, and then that knocks you out of the competitive range, if you say. And then I created an Excel template to help you build those repeatable pricing models. You can use that as a template just to get you started, so you can understand what all is involved in building your cost proposal. And then we're going over that section 3 of the cost proposal. How would you fill that in? And then how what we're trying to do is verify that what the evaluators see is what we've given them. So that's what this training is designed to do. Now let's go over the agenda. All right, so the introduction to cost proposals, key components of a cost proposal, and then the types of contracts and their impact on pricings, because that is very important. And then tips for developing a competitive and compliant cost proposal. And like we said earlier, at the end, I leave about 10 minutes too for questions, but throughout I do stop and answer those questions. All right, so that way I can make sure it's a interactive session and everybody is getting something from each session. All right, let's go. Okay, so what is a cost proposal? In context, it's in government contracting, a cost proposal is a detailed financial plan that outlines all of the expenses associated with completing a project as requested in the RFP, RFQ, information for bid. It doesn't matter. It's just that. That's what it is. It provides the government agency with a breakdown of how much you, as the prime contractor or subcontractor, estimate it will cost to deliver the goods and service described in the technical proposal. So I just give you those bullet points of all of that summarized in those bullet points. Okay. But let me tell you why it's important. The cost proposal is one of the most important components of your overall bid. And depending on the evaluation criteria, when it's best in value, they could put pricing could be 75%, and the technical capabilities, what they want to look at your approach, could be 25%, or it could be 50-50. That is why it's important to understand how are they evaluating this cost proposal. Is it lowest price technically acceptable? Now, if it's lowest price technically acceptable, but they're looking for who can give them what they need at the lowest cost. Okay. So that is what you have to understand. And it works in tandem with the technical proposal, which explains how you will accomplish this project, right? Now, while the technical proposal demonstrates your approach and your expertise and the ability to perform the work, the cost proposal provides transparency about what the effort will cost. And they normally call a level of effort, basically. Okay. Now, the government agencies are required to evaluate both aspects, okay, the technical feasibility and the cost. And when determining which contractor will be awarded the contract, a well prepared cost proposal. And what it does, it shows you who have thoroughly planned how to execute the project, ensures the government that the project can be completed within the budget. All right, because you done told them, okay, I can do this for $100,000 or whatever you have proposed this cost proposal, and they're expecting you to stay within that proposed budget. Now, it also helps establish that your pricing is fair, reasonable, and competitive. All right. Make sure it's fair, reasonable, and competitive. For example, if the technical proposal outlines a highly complex solution, but your cost is too low, the government may doubt your ability to deliver the project at the proposed price, because they're saying in their mind, oh, I don't think they really understand what we're asking, because they have the historical data of what this normally costs. Sometimes it's a new requirement and there isn't, but they have the independent government cost estimate that they propose that it should cost and how much level of effort. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if the technical proposal is straightforward, but the cost seems inflated, it may signal inefficiencies in your pricing, and that will also lead to a potential rejection. That's why I'm really harping on understanding how to put it all together so that way you always are in the competitive range. You want it fair, reasonable, and at a competitive range. Okay. And then let's move to the next slide. Okay, so the importance of a well prepared cost proposal. Okay, a well prepared cost proposal can be the difference between winning and losing. All right, and government contracting is just not about how well you can perform the work. They want to make sure that you have shown that in that technical proposal. It's all about how you price your services, okay? A clear, detailed, and realistic cost proposal. Okay, it has to be realistic. I've seen a lot of unrealistic proposals, and then they're trying to figure out, well, okay, why didn't I win this? Well, it wasn't clear, it wasn't realistic, and it was out of the competitive range. It was either inflated or it was very low cost, and they didn't really take into account of what was all involved in it. Now, failing to prepare an accurate cost proposal can undermine even the best technical approach. All right. You got the best technical approach out there. However, your pricing is not in the competitive range. That's going to disqualify you. That's going to knock you out right there. So that's why it's important to do both. You can't just have the technical approach. Yes, you the SME at acquisition or you the SME at the messaging and media, but you have to know how to articulate it, and then you also have to know how, okay, this is how we're going to price it. Okay. Now, pricing, competitive pricing, profitability. That's the hardest part. You got to be able to, okay, what our goal is to make money in our businesses, right? But you got to understand all of the costs, which costs you can cut, which cost. It's a It's a dance, right? It's about going, setting up a structure, and then seeing where all your fees are, stuff that is fixed that you have to do, and then those things that you can flex and move in order to generate that profit, if you will. Okay, so it is critical to balance the competitive pricing with your need for profitability. Here's how: undercutting your price too much to win the contract can lead to losses during the project execution. You could end up covering your costs, not covering your costs, I apologize, or sacrificing your profit margin that you had created in the beginning, which could affect your company's financial health. We go into business so that way we could generate revenue to pay our bills and take care of our family. Well, if you're undercutting, how can you do that? How can you continue to grow the business to provide for your team and your staff? Oh, well, and you have to have the equipment that you need, the materials, and so forth and so on. So that will all contribute to the health of your company. Now, overpricing, on the other hand, can price you out of competition. If your proposal is significantly higher than others, the government may select a lower price bid, especially when the requirement said this is a firm fixed price contract. That means you include in everything in that cost. And then, oh, it's the lowest price technically acceptable. So they're telling you to go in, evaluate how can you get this work done for me at the lowest price technically acceptable for your organization. So remember, add that to it, your organization. Now, if you find after you've done the research, you've put together your little spreadsheet and report, and you see this opportunity is not worth bidding on, then you will use that as your no bid. Okay, we're not going to go after conducting all of the research. We've done all our analysis. We see that this is not profitable, or if anything, we're in the hole. Then you will know, okay, we're not going to go after this. These are not opportunities that are ideal for our company because it even covered the break even. Okay, but how about you're one of those organizations where you have 2 or 3 contracts already, and you decided, well, we're going to take, we really want to win this because we want to gain the past performance on this opportunity, right? Because it's with the agency that we is one of our target agencies, and we just need to break into this agency and show them what we can do. We've been doing this for XYZ agency, for this agency, and oh, by the way, we've done it in commercial. So we're very good at what we do. Now, can we take this cost? Can we take this loss, if you will? Because it's not a loss per se. It's just you've um were able to price it at a lower price only because you had other opportunities that will continue to hold the financial health of your organization. So that's why it's important when you're conducting these strategy sessions and these different factors that need to be factored in when you're coming up with your cost proposal. These are some of the things you got to start thinking about as a small business. Some of these different challenges that you're going to face. Well, if we go after this one, we're going to really hurt the financial health of our business. And that's what I'm trying to get you to start thinking of. As a CEO and a business owner, how can I protect my company and grow steady and slow? Okay. And that is what this training is, to help you to find that balance between competitive while ensuring that your business is still profitable. So that is why we develop these trainings, and we hope that it is a help to you. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, now this we're going over the solicitation that we began in proposal level 1 and 2. So I'm going to pause right here, and then I'm going to show you which opportunity that we're going, because everything we're doing has been leading up to this. And then when we have the last training for that cost administration, then we'll close it all up. Okay, so you've created that folder that we discussed from the prepare for your next counseling session. All right, so now we've got the folder created. All right, the opportunity, we went on sam.gov. We checked to make sure there was no amendments, no updates, because we're trying to finalize our calls. And in order to finalize the calls, you got to make sure they haven't had any amendments or anything that will affect your pricing. Okay, so I went in, I found the opportunity, because now if you don't find an opportunity when you go in, always click the button inactive, because sometimes they'll go already put it on the inactive. So that's when you went in there to go check and you didn't see it, it's because it has already been inactive. Okay, so that is one of the things you always have to make sure you look at. And then also, I want to make sure I keep telling you, the far overhaul is going on. So a lot of things are going to be changing. You need to stay on top of that. So also make sure you always checking out and reading the different updates, because it's going to affect you as a small business. So make sure you stay on top of that. So we went in, we found out that this opportunity did have an amendment. They added the question and answers. That was after our last training we had, they added the question and answers. So make sure you go in, download the question and answers to make sure that there hasn't changed anything that would affect your pricing, because mind you, we've been working on this opportunity. It came out in August, and then they keep updated, and then I went and I seen that they had an amendment. Okay, the amendment told us that they were going to extend this opportunity, so I had more time to work on my cost proposal and my technical proposal part. And the reason I know they extended it, because it tells me right here. So let me blow it up a little bit to make sure you can see it. Okay, the purpose of this amendment, 0001 amendment, is to extend the offer's due date from the 16th to the 19th. So, oh, now we've went in, we've updated everything. We know, oh, I have more time. So then you add that to your calendar to make sure you have that updated time. Okay, so now we know it's extended. So then we got the question and answer. Let me blow that up for you. So I've read through all the question and answers. So I get this question all the time. Has this opportunity been out there before? So someone asked the question, is there an incumbent for this contract? So that means, is there someone currently doing this contract? No, there is no incumbent for this contract. At this time, right? This is the first time it has been issued. So that means, okay, so how do I come up with my pricing, right? Because these are some of the questions you're going to have as we go through the training. So that's why I always stop, so you can see how everything comes together, because this is what happens. We get lost because there's so many different steps. We do not know how to assess the steps and which steps should we take next. So this is how we go through the to make sure that, so we already know we're going to have to look at other things to get the historical, so we can look at other kinds of campaigns. Could be for a different agency, because they're telling you here at the State Department, we haven't done this one before. This is the first time. So now you're going to have to go different places, and we're going to talk about that. Different places you can go to start researching previous campaigns done at other organizations, or because we're looking for same and similar, right? Everything is either it's the same or similar. It's about the same, similar scope of work, so forth and so on. That is how you figure out those things. So then I went in here to make sure it wasn't any questions asking about calls or updating the calls. And what does it say? Does the embassy has any guidelines for percentage spend on each component of the campaign? For example, purchased advertising versus production, right? And they tell you no specific guidelines. So that would affect how you came up with your pricing. So that's why I tell you, you have to go in here and look at all this, because this is how you're going to find out how to target and how to price, because they're telling you exactly what they're looking for, and you'll just continue to read all of the questions, making sure there's nothing that would affect the pricing. So now we went in here, we looked at all of they're telling you there's specific high migration, the multiple I always jack that word up. I apologize, everyone. And then for the embassy and prioritize for the outreach. So you just go in here and they're telling you, should the bidder propose which area to target? And then they'll give you the answer. So that's why I always tell you, go in here and read everything. Make sure there is nothing that requires, or this one even went in there and said the level of embassy oversight and approval will it be required for the creative content before publication, and they're already telling you. So you already know you got to implement the approval process, because they want to approve all content before publication. So that means I'm gonna have to add that in my pricing, because that's another step. So that's how you figure out how different things need to go into your pricing, and then you break that down in the Excel spreadsheet that we're going to cover as we continue to move along in the slides. And this was the solicitation that we had started going over, that we're discussing. So all of this is about this opportunity that we identified that we would like to go after. Okay, so now let me go back to the slides. Okay. And then, so this is the one, and it's a 12 months. So the period of performance is 12 months for this contract award. So you know that it's for 12 months. So that why you already know what you're working with. Okay. So now let's go to the next slide before we take questions. Okay. Because I like to stop periodically and make sure there is no questions. Okay. Now, what pricing requires. Okay, because this contract is a firm fixed price contract. So the firm fixed price contract structure. Now, the pricing must align with the deliverables, and you get that from the scope of work. Then they're going to be going over labor categories, the hours, and the unit rates. Then in this requirement, it talked about the media placement and production costs, and then a narration explanation, optional but recommended. I always recommend, okay, give them an understanding, because although they're good at contracting, they may not have had a requirement for media specialists before, or media campaigns before. So what you're doing is you're teaching them, okay, this is what needs to happen. This is how we plan to make it happen. And this is the cost for making it happen. So you're explaining to them, who are not the subject matter experts. You may have one or you may not, but they're good at contracting. They're good at writing the requirements. They're good at doing all this. But your job as the SME, the subject matter expert, is to explain to them, okay, this is why we got this price. So they can feel like, oh, I'm confident to know that they haven't overpriced me, they have not undercut themselves, and they understand the requirement. And while giving it at the lowest price technically acceptable. You understand what I'm saying? So that is important when you're coming up with the pricing. Now, what is included? Okay, costs. What's included in the cost? So the labor categories, and then the estimated line of effort. I apologize, level of effort. Okay. Then the media content creation and the placement. Then the project management, and that's the M&E. I think it was. Oh, I apologize. I put an acronym in here. I keep putting these acronyms in here, expecting you all to know. And that's the media, and if I'm not mistaken, entertainment or engagement. Media and engagement. I should have put that in there. And then the travel, if applicable. So if this one requires for travel, then make sure you have those travel costs, because all of that has to be included in a firm fixed price contract. And there's no breaking it out. There's no nothing. You have to include it if you want it covered. You see what I'm saying? Because we do business so that way we can make profit. Now, are you going to be using subcontractors or vendor services? And then you have to make sure if indirect rates and profit if allowed in this requirement. So you just read through the solicitation so that way you know how to build that to build your pricing. Okay, so it's basically time for me to stop real quick before, because I'll continue to keep going on, but I want to make sure there's no questions before I proceed.
Thank you, Akiesha. And welcome to
Mhm.
everybody who joined us since we started. If you can type out your questions in the chat. So far, we don't have any questions, so I'll let you know when we do.
You. And I must be doing something right, or it's just because this is because of all your questions you had in the first training, we were able to add all of this. So that gives me very good encouragement to keep going. Okay, so now we're going to break it into those labor categories. And so what we're going to do is going to break down each and every one of these so you can understand how it all ties into this training and how you will take this what you're learning today. So say you're doing products and products and not services, then it's going to be just a little bit different. And that's why we're doing the different. Last year we did a service contract, and it was basically janitorial services, and this time we're doing media. And my goal is to also do products as well in different types, so when you're going through the different series, you'll have examples. Okay, you can revert back to uh, 2025's lesson on media, especially if you're a media company. But if you're not, basic principles apply throughout. Okay, it doesn't matter what industry, the basic principles apply throughout. And that is what I'm trying to instill in our small business community. Okay, so now I wanted to go over. Okay, so now because I am not the SME at media, so I started brainstorming. Okay, so I'm like, okay, what I need a campaign manager. So these are just some basic roles that I start thinking in my mind. So I got my little note sheet, and I'm brainstorming, because remember, we just got this. We seen this opportunity. We started mapping everything out, what the requirements was, and what you're looking for is in the solicitation for this. Did they have language for this? Are they asking for this? Can one person do this? Or can two people? You're asking these questions, and these are the assumptions you're making, right? Do I need them full time, part time, or as needed? Or the creative director, they're going to provide strategy and oversight. And then a content creator, they're going to do the produce the videos, graphics, digital media, because these are the things you're thinking about. Oh, in this region, they asked for a translator. So that means you're going to have a translator if you don't have a translator on the on staff. So that means that's basically a subcontractor role, unless you have an employee that can fulfill this. So that's basically a subcontractor role. And this will give you an opportunity to learn how to start doing business with subcontractors. This is ideal. This will actually have you start building your subcontractors database pool. So you'll have individuals that do different services for you. You've built your spreadsheet out. You have all this information. So that way, if another opportunity comes up, you already know, okay, I've worked with XYZ. They provided Spanish translations for me on this contract and that contract. Oh, let me send them an email real quick and let them know this opportunity is coming up. Are they available? Number one. And then what's their pricing? Because remember, now you're going to have to add their pricing in this cost proposal as well, because it's a firm fixed price. They don't care if it's the subcontract. They don't. All they want to know is, how much do I have to pay you for this opportunity? Period. So this is our role as small business owners. Or how am I going to make this happen? Can I make it happen with a part-time person, or can I make it happen with an as needed 1099er or something? Because if we get an employee, which we talked about that in another training, you're going to have your unemployment compensation, all those things. But if this is a one-off project, then it's ideal to get a subcontractor. It's ideal to get a 1099er, so that way they're responsible for all those extra fees, because they're also learning how, and then you're giving them a chance to learn to start building their business, and they can take that off in their taxes and start growing their business and so forth. Oh, I apologize. Let me drink a little sip of water. I apologize. Okay. And then so that is why It is important, and people don't understand that all of these things go into pricing. And so when we break it out, that's why I break it out topic by topic, each section by section, so you always know how it goes in effect. Okay, so now let's keep moving because you know that time goes fast. Okay, so now let's talk about the key components. All right, so let's go to the next slide. All right, key components of a cost proposal. We have the direct cost, that's the labor and materials. We have the indirect cost, the overhead, the fringe benefits, and G&A. Okay, and then the profit. Okay, so now let's go over that. So where you'll find all this information is in the FAR. So you already know, we already know the FAR is going through a FAR overhaul. So I recommend that you strongly go to the FAR, and I showed you where that was in the, let's go back to Sam, and they gave you a link to that, the FAR overhaul, and where you can keep going in to check to make sure nothing has changed about the requirements for the direct costs, indirect costs, and the profit. Okay, but as of now, I haven't seen any changes. The allowable cost is under FAR Part 31. Now, if it's changed, I definitely will go in and check again, but I hadn't seen it's changed. And that's why I always tell you to do your due diligence. When I created the slides, it may have not changed, and then it changed again. So that's why it's always important to trust. Yeah, you can trust, but verify. Always verify that the information that you're being taught is legit and has not changed because of so many different administrative changes coming with this new administration. So let's go over what allowable costs are. Okay, and that's FAR Part 31. Are those that the government considers reasonable, allocable, and compliant with the contract terms and the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation guidelines. Okay, these costs can be included in a cost proposal and reimbursed under certain contract types. Okay, but that's why I always tell you this one is a firm fixed price, so it does not apply some of those things. Okay, but what is allowable, because you want to know what can I put in my cost proposal. So for example, direct labor, the wages, the salaries of employees directly engaged in the contract award, that if it's overtime pay, if properly authorized, materials and supplies, the cost of materials, supplies necessary for the performance of the contract. Say if some shipping is involved, shipping and handling charges directly related to materials used for the contract. So that's why I love to break it down, because people don't understand. You have to break it down. That you need to know what the direct cost is, because you need this for the information for yourself as well as business owners. So you'll know what you have to have on hand, supplies, what subscriptions, so you can effectively deliver what the government is asking you to do. You're not reactive, you're proactive, because you've done all the necessary things, so you know how much profit you're generating in your business. It's all to generate and to build a sustaining business, because one day some of you may want to become a medium and large business. Well, this is how you get started. If you can not establish the foundation first, then you're not going to be able to really grow a sustainer, because many get stuck. They get stuck at the small business level because they can't figure out where are the missing pieces or the gaps that's holding them back from going to the next level, becoming a medium sized or large business. So this is why you started off strong. You build that foundation, then you can continue. Just like with a house, if you have a strong foundation, the house will stand. But if it doesn't, it's gonna fall. That's just the way it is. So then we got the subcontractor costs, payments to subcontractors for work that is done within the scope of the prime contract. And then we talked about the fringe benefits. Employers contribute to employees' health insurance, retirement plans, paid leave, costs associated with legally required payroll taxes, which are your Social Security and Medicare. That's why I was telling you also, sometimes because you're brand new, you might be like, I'm not ready to hire any employees yet. I'm going to subcontract those roles. So then you know you're going to need that team and agreement. You know you're going to need those NDAs and non disclosures and all of those things that you need to have prepared for these times like this, when you just need someone to come in for just a specific, specialized role. Okay. Now, overhead costs, those indirect costs necessary to support the operations. All right. Some of you may have co working spaces. Some of you may have infrastructure, like you got your utilities, your rent, your office supplies. These costs are typically allocated as a percentage of the direct labor costs. And I had a one example. I mean, it was very sad. I helped a client get a janitorial contract. They won the contract. However, one of the things we learned, because I asked, and I had already told the client, I said, make sure you do a site visit to make sure that you have um, allocated expenses for everything, seen and unseen. You did the square footage, mileage, and everything. Well, she said, I'm going to let the subcontractor do that. Okay. Well, but you are the prime. You're responsible for that. Well, the subcontractor did not go to the site visit. So when the prime contractor asked about those, they didn't have it. So they just place, because now the time is running out for the proposal to be submitted. Well, guess what? They underbid. So when it was time to perform the work, the subcontractor wouldn't perform the work because the prime contractor didn't have enough money allocated for the contract. So the prime contractor made the decision to let the contract go. But now what happens? That's messed with your past performance. Now this opportunity has to be re-solicited out there, or they might take the next person on the list. It depends on how they write it and how those things. So when I say these things to you, I'm telling you, it is important that you understand the cost proposal, because she could not afford the sub. She was not in the state, so she had to rely on the stub because she won the contract and you're the prime. So you expected the subcontract to perform, but they would not perform on the price that you quoted the government, because it did not allocate for all the square footage, for moving of equipment, for having different things. See, this is the things you learn when you go visit, they'll do those site visits. You see how many buildings, how many things are in the way that you're going to have to lift. That's going to take time. And all those things. Or can you go at this certain time, or at this time they're not allowing you to come in and clean, so now you got to get someone on a different shift, and they're going to require shift differential and all those different things that apply to that. So I always love to give good examples of some of the real world case studies, and there are different things I've dealt with when advising and recommending certain things on the cost proposal. And then we talked about the travel costs. Those are the expenses for employees travel, making sure you get that mileage in there, making sure you get that the lodging, the meals, all those different things in there, because you're not allocated unless there's a CLIN on there that says that they're going to pay for travel. And I did not see a CLIN, which we're going to go over in detail. There was no line item for travel. So that means you got to get your travel in there somewhere. Then you would add that to your spreadsheet, travel. That way you can include the travel in there, especially if there's travel. Even if it's 25% travel in there, then you need to include that 25% travel. Okay, because you want to make sure that it has the airfare, the lodging, the meals, the local, according to the joint travel regulations. So make sure you're using the JTR, because if you're trying to put in first class, that's not going to work. It needs to be just a regular flight. going according to the joint travel regulation, and then you'll be good to go. And that's what you're going to put in the proposal. Now, also, if there's depreciation of equipment, that is key. Do you have any depreciation of equipment, property use in this contract? The method of depreciation must comply with the federal acquisition regulation standard, straight line depreciation. Okay, but now if they changed it, things are subject to change because we're changing everything all the time. So that's why I always recommend you check and verify. And then every quarter, you need to be checking again. You could check every month, every quarter, but specifically if you're submitting a contract, you want to check because you don't want to make sure nothing has changed and you're about to submit this contract. Just make it a practice to check. All right, now the general and administration. Remember, we were talking about the G&A costs. That's your executive management salaries, your legal fees for having someone to review your documents if you have one on staff, your human resources if you have one on staff, your virtual assistant that helps you with all your contracts, or your BD, those different things, that overall business, including the contract performance. Those are allowable costs. Now let's talk about some of the unallowable costs according to FAR Part 31 that are not authorized by the government and should not be included in a cost proposal. Okay, now including those should be entertainment costs, like costs for social activities, recreation, entertainment. I have put all of these things that I'm going over in the notes section. So when you get your slides, all of this is in the notes section of the PowerPoint slideshow. So I try to make sure I give you all the tools you need to be successful. Okay, then you have the alcoholic beverages. Do not put alcoholic beverages on anything. Okay. Then lobbying costs, fines and penalties, charitable donations, bad debts, and so on and so forth. It's so many things out there. So I've put that in the notes for you. So that way you can go and visit that at a later time, making sure you add that in your standard operating procedures, making sure that you do not do anything that will impact your contract. Given if you get an audit or anything of that nature, you want to make sure that all of the things that we're talking about, the allowable and the unallowable costs, are associated in the correct way and are all done. So let's keep going. Okay, for the interest of time, because it's a lot to cover. Okay, so now what are direct costs? The definition: direct costs are those that can be specifically and clearly attributed to this project. So we're talking about the messaging project, the messaging campaign development project. Everything has to be associated to this project. So your labor, your media placement, and your subcontractors. That's why I keep saying it, because we'll try to put things in there that should not be. It I know you want to be able to put all the allocations, everything in there. And then the way I did that was I broke it out into three main categories, because the things we have to consider. So these direct costs, right? These are the expenses are directly tied to delivering the scope of work. So I got this from the scope of work in the proposal. All right. So, and it clearly identifies and it's traceable, because like I said, if you get an audit, you want to make sure everything is allocated to that. So now let me show the example, because I know people are visual. They need to see how it's broken out into. So what we did was I put an example on the next slide for you of just a basic calculation, because this is not my area expertise, but I do know how you go and get the information and basically get your calculations. Okay, so what I did was all of this I created in a spreadsheet. These are the resources that I use, so let's go to it. All right, so what I did was I created a spreadsheet. Okay, simple. In Google or Excel, you start creating a spreadsheet. You break out each CLIN, that's that line item. Okay, they asking for a campaign. Let me blow it up a little bit. Let me blow it up because we like to be able to see. So let me blow it up a little bit. All right, so we're building out our pricing as we go because we want to make sure we do not miss anything. So what I did was I started listing what was on the solicitation. So let's go to the solicitation. So you'll see exactly where to get the information from. So we'll just scroll down. We're going to the solicitation. We already know we got to fill out this. So I just did an example, right? Showing you, okay, we know they're going to have something there. If they don't, they just put it right here in block 20. Let me make sure I blow this up. Okay, so the supplies, because this is the official award that you're going to sign, and how you came up with these costs. We know it's one job. This is our price we decided we're going to bid this contract on. Okay. Then we sign here. We put our signature here. We print right here. And then we dated it. So we're done with this. Okay. And then they filled in everything else. I believe sometimes they put the contractor code information in there. I can't remember right now, but I know it goes right here, the contractor's information. And I just can't remember what phase right now. I apologize. Now let's keep going. So we're looking at, this is how I came up with my pricing. So we know we're doing the messaging campaign development, right? Because I'm always highlighting, I need to know what it's for, how many months it's for, 12 months. So then ideally, you just go in here and you highlight it. Okay, because we know this is for the peer to performance is for 12 months. You just highlight it. Okay, so now we've highlighted that. They tell you already, although they said the value added tax is not applicable to this contract and shall not be included in the CLIN rates or invoices because of the embassy. The U.S. Embassy has a tax exempt certificate from the host government. So they already told you, do not try to include that in here because it's not allowed. Okay, so we know when we create our pricing, that is not allowed. And then they already told you it was going to be in US dollars. Okay, so now let's keep going on. Now, this is where we got all of our information. Now we on section 3, a 1 year, the contractor shall provide the services shown below for the base period of the contract. So I took everything that was on here and I put it on a spreadsheet because I'm a proposal person. I do everything, everything I do. I shred documents. I go pull all the data that I need because I don't want to have to keep looking at the data. Plus, I'm making sure I have historical information so I understand how I came up with my pricing, how I did this. I'm documenting my records with how I did this, how I did. So next time we know if this opportunity come up, I'm gonna pull out my historical information on the opportunity that I bid on before. Boom. I'm not reinventing any wheels here. I'm trying to make everything so simple, so easy, so repeatable. So when I hire people on my team, and like I told you, when you're hiring people on your team and they're only doing finance, those files are restricted because that is your intellectual property. That's all of your pricing, financial information. You have to keep that stuff restricted and only share that information when necessary and needed, and only bits of pieces of the information. Because one day they're my subcontractor, the next day we're competing against the contract together. So they already know XYZ proposed this on the contract last time. So you have to be strategic when you're dealing with your strategic partners. I mean, that's just the part of it. That's the part of it. But learning how to go into it is going to be critical. Okay. So I went and broke each one out so I can know. All right, then I went the types of services, all the things that's involved. You can get as granular, as detailed as you want. And you put that on a different line and then you feed it into the cost breakdown. But going through each and every line, making sure I allocate all of your costs will give you the direct costs. But for the sake of time, I just went straight to the direct costs. And I'm telling you, you have to go include all of that. And all you would do is add a new tab. And then for each tab, you would do your cleanse. So cleanse one, make sure you get all your and you just keep adding tabs, right? Add another sheet, add another tab, and that way you know how you came up with your pricing for each, because you want to consider inflation, you want to click if they go up on a subscription, all those things for each cleanse has to be breakdown. And then that will feed into here. Now we're going to talk about your indirect costs. What is allocated? Is it 10%, 20%? What is the percentage? And what you want to do is the industry best practice and standards for your industry. I don't know what that is for you. I don't know what that is for media, but I do know best practice with APMP. And normally I just stick with 15 to 20%. All right, indirect costs, because we want to make sure we allocate some indirect costs in there. And if you forgot what that indirect cost is, go back to the slides. It will be in your notes section, what indirect costs are. Then you're going to add those together. Okay, so you'll know what it is, and then how much profit. Are you doing 1%, 2%, 3%, 10%, whatever? You want to be reasonable and industry best practice for profit, because who knows you're going to get a profit, that you're trying to put a little profit in there, but you got to make sure that it's competitive, it's fair, reasonable, and competitive. That's all on you. You got to figure that out for yourself. My goal is to give you the tools, the resource, and how you come up to this. And then your job is to research for your industry, because so many different industries is on this call. I can't just focus on one. But what I can do is give you the general information, and then you specifically figure out, how does this apply to construction? How does this apply to a administration company or a management consulting company? All those things. What is allowable for percentage for profit? But that's why I say 10%. But according to the FAR, if I'm not mistaken, I think they had like 3 to 5. I mean, it wasn't much. So that's why I said it depends, and you have to do the extra research to find out what the profit basis is, because you don't want to violate that. But my goal is to give you rounded numbers so you can see how it all applies, and then you can adjust that profit according to your industry and according to the federal acquisition regulation. Okay, and state is going to be different too. So that's why I always tell you, make sure you understand, if you want after a state requirement, like in the state of Maryland or Texas, might totally be different. But know how to get that information, okay? And then I put the price. And so now that is where I got the total. So when you seen the total on there, that is where I got my totals per year. This is how much it takes for me. It be more or less for you. This is how you break that down. Now, how I got the labor costs, I go to the GSA by gsa.gov. All right. That is where I went to go get some pricing, because sometimes I'll be like, okay, so I want to go in here and I'm going to look in here, put some information in. You're going to fill out the level of expertise, experience, price, all of this. And then they're going to give you some ranges right here. They're going to give you some ranges. So for like this administrative assistant, one, they're telling you with a high school diploma, you're going to get 1509, and with zero experience. So you're going to at least get 1509 for this job. So that way you can put that into your pricing. So, and I recommend that you create a sheet for pricings for your labor categories, for your staffing, all of that has to be created. But the goal is so you'll have it the next time, and then you know how much you paid for that role next time. So that's one way of getting information. So me, I like to verify. This is the GSA e-buy one. So now I'm going to go in Indeed. I love Indeed too. You go in Indeed, you hit find salaries, and then you go and just click. So if we was to click the sales executive or something like that, they're giving you a basis to get started and then you put the United States, or if it's a Maryland, you put Maryland, so you can find out. And then you just go in here and say, well, I want to know what the hour is. You click on the hour, and it tells you 37.80 an hour. So this is another way, because remember, we want to be in the competitive range. So we have to do what everybody else is doing. Okay. Or another way of finding out this information is FPDS. So I'm going to go into FPDS when we come back, because I want to make sure that you understand when I'm walking, these are where you're getting the costs from. And how many hours is because you're the subject matter expert and you know, and you're answering what they said, 12 months, 1 month, whatever. It takes 300 hours to do the digital media specialist, or whatever you deem it to be. All right, so we're going to pause right here, take a quick 5 minute, and be back to finish it up.
Okay, welcome back, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, so let's finish our last example. Okay, so the example for the direct calls. So the three main categories for the direct cost for this solicitation, right? The labor cost, wages for the team working on the campaign strategy, content creation, media placement, and reporting. So that's what we've covered. All right. The key considerations, right? Estimated hours based on the deliverables and the scope of work. This is where I'm getting all this information from, because I've read the scope of work. I see what they asked for in the scope of work, and that's how I came up with this. All right. The media content, and then the reporting. Now remember, because if it's an employee, you have to include those fringe taxes, benefits, overhead, if not indirect, right? That goes toward the contract. So if it goes toward the contract, it's direct. If it doesn't, and it's for somebody who does everything, then that's going to be a little different. Okay. So that's why I said make sure you understand how you're getting all of that. And so for that's for the labor. Now for the media placement costs, right? Funds spent to publish or broadcast content on TV, if they have radio, newspaper, digital platforms, right? Key considerations. Price varies by platform and reach. So Facebook, radio time, press articles, all that's different. So that's why I wanted you to break every single CLIN, every single cost down, because it's gonna add up. And then you're gonna be like, what? And say you just pick the price. Well, okay, I'm gonna do 5,000, but actually it was 5,500. I mean, you know what I'm saying? 5,500. So that's the difference. That's why you want to know exactly what the costs are, so that way you can come up with your and then for subcontractors, or if you have a consultant come in, fixed fee or hourly rate, depending on the service. And then that's why I always say you have to make all of these assumptions clear in writing, so you can see how much it costs you, and there's no hidden fees, and then it comes to bite you later, and then you've lost all your profit margin because you didn't allocate for if you needed to hire a video production team to come in, you know, that video production team, and because you just don't have the capability or the qualifications to do that, so you had to add that video production team. And then, like I said, put in the travel. So you will create all that for the travel, especially if they're requiring you to do any of that. All right. All right. So let's go to the next one. What are indirect costs? We gave you a little brief, talked about it in the notes section, but the indirect costs are shared across multiple contracts and cannot be contributed to just one. It's like I said before, it's that admin staff, it's your rent, utilities, your shared equipment that you're using across all of your contracts, your health insurance, your PTO, the paid time off, retirement, so forth and so on. It is important that you understand you can only take a percentage of that. That's why I showed you in the spreadsheet I built out. So say that I get audited, I have everything built out. Okay, this is how I came up with my pricing. It's legit. everything's, and then when you going after your GSA schedule, they're going to be digging deep dive in your costs because they have different requirements because they want to see how much you charge in other companies and organizations because the government want the discount. They want the best price, so they're looking at that to see how much you're charging others so they can know how much that you should be charging them. So that's why I tell you it's important to start getting those things right now because why it matters. Failing to include overhead can lead to underpricing and cash flow problems down the line. For long-term contracts and then heavy reporting requirements, how much time does it take for you to send? Are they asking for weekly reports, monthly reports? That's going to take time. So you need to allocate time for that. So that's why it's important that is there any coordination needs? Because remember, they said, look, we need to approve this content before you even publish. So that's some back and forth right there. How many times, how long is it going to take all that back and forth? It's 2-3 times. What normally has to happen? Or say they send it back, say, no, we need some edits, some corrections. All that is going to require more time. So it's important that you understand that. We talked about the fringe benefits and all of that as well, and why it matters because fringe is part of the true cost of labor. It's part of the cost. So you need to make sure you're allocating for that because it ensures you are not losing money by covering benefits out of pocket. So now you're paying everything out of pocket, and that's defeating the purpose. Now you're not gonna have that financial health that you need to really scale and grow your business as you need to bring on new people on the team. You want to have money already allocated for that. And then for the G&A, the general and administrative costs, why that matters. It ensures your company remains compliant, fully funded, functional, and supports you in winning future contracts because the goal is always to win more contracts. And you can't do that if you do not have any money allocated for the growth of your company. And I gave you a little example of that, just kind of like showing you overhead labor, 3,000 hours of labor, your percentage. I don't know your companies. I don't know how many employees you have. I don't know any of those things. I don't know if it's an army of one or two or three. It's whatever is in your organization, and then you're going to do the percentage. For this example, I just like to keep clean numbers, keep it straightforward and simple, and I just allocated 30,000 labor hours, fringe benefits, and then all costs for the G&A. I only did 10% for G&A because I want to make sure I'm not going over. So like I told you, go look those up, see what it is for your industry, best practices, what is norm, what happens normally. Fringe did 18% and the overhead I did 20% because that's across all contracts. And then that's what I got my total for the indirect costs. So when you see these things broken out in the Excel spreadsheet, this is what I'm talking about right here because I'm taking you step by step on how you get this information. All right, now let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, so we talked about the indirect costs and I gave you the example. Now let's talk about the profit because many times as a small business, we do not really understand the importance of the profit. The profit is the amount your company, right, earns above your cost for completing the work. It's the financial reward for taking on risks and managing the performance and delivering results. All right, what we're trying to deliver exceptional results that they're going to want to keep doing business with our company. Now in a firm fixed price contracts, right, profit is built into your final number. The government does not negotiate it separately, but they do expect it to be reasonable. And how you do that is creating your transparency document, how you came up with your rate if asked. Okay, now why you need to include profit. It covers risks. All right, we're taking the risk. We're taking all of the, say one of your employees don't show up for work and all this stuff, so something got delayed, something was missed or something like that. All right, the costs, overruns, delays, scope creep, the profit is there for, it's like a little buffer, if anything. We hope we don't have to use our buffer, but if we do, we have it. All right. It compensates you for your all of this information we didn't put in here. We didn't gave them our best. We didn't put our technical approach. We took the time, energy, got our team together, and we bid on this opportunity. Okay, so it's like your reward, because we as human beings love our rewards, and our reward is to win the contract. All right, we want to win the contract, and so we want to make sure we put all of that effort in to win this contract. All right, and then it supports your business and it reinvests in your business for future growth. Like I said, some of you may plan to stay small on purpose. Others may like, no, I want to become medium and large. Well, these are some of the things you're going to have to learn to become a medium and large business. And then it ensures the long-term sustainability of your business. Having these things in place ensures sustainability. And that's our goal. We want to be able to continue to, either if we pass it down to generations, or if we hire someone or sell the business or whatever, you want to be able to give this information to whoever's buying the business. It's just a host of things you can do. All right, and then how to calculate. How I calculate it, just kept it pretty simple. The total of direct and indirect, and then the rate, right? We said 10%. That's how I got it. So we know we got $6,000, over $6,000 to work with, right? So that way, if something happens, or, we got a little flexibility, right? And the goal is not to have to use it, but if we do, we have it. Okay. And that makes a difference. All right. Now let's go to the types of contracts. Okay. Now, the types of contracts, how the type of contracts impact on your pricing. Okay. So, like I said, they are updating the FAR, but as of now, nothing has changed for these: the firm fixed price, the time and materials, and the cost reimbursable. So this is a firm fixed price contract, but I want you to also start becoming familiar with the time and materials, because sometimes I've seen a lot of firm fixed price contracts also with the time and materials. Okay, so be aware of those. Those are billed based on hours worked and materials used, and that's a totally different way of doing business. And then you would have to create a sheet, that spreadsheet that is set up for time and materials. Cost reimbursement, the same thing, reimbursed for allowable costs plus a fixed or incentive fee, depending on which one it is. So that's why I tell you it is important that you understand what type of contract that you are definitely bidding on, so that way you can implement that in your pricing, because knowing how to implement that in your pricing is definitely, you have to have it accurate, because this, you don't get compensated for a firm fixed price contract. So the pricing must be highly accurate and should include those contingencies for an unforeseen issues. All right. And then the contractor must ensure that all potential costs, direct and indirect, are factored into the fixed price proposal. And we talked about that, including labor, materials, overhead, and profit. Now, the key consideration that I want you to make sure you remember: while firm fixed price contracts often offer certainty for the government, the contractor takes on the greater financial risks and must carefully control costs to avoid overruns. And that is why I have taken the time to really dissect the firm fixed price contract, because that's what you're going to see mostly for very simple, like a janitorial contract or these different small contracts. Now, the complex is more for the cost reimbursable, but if an agency is unsure of how much time or anything of that nature, sometimes they'll do the time and materials so they can kind of get a baseline, because they're not sure. Just like this requirement was a new requirement, so they're not really sure of the level of effort. So that way, they would probably add a time and materials claim, right? But because this one, they basically just telling you, look, this is all we want. We telling you, tell us the level of effort, the scope, the actuals, the costs, and all that, and we're going to work within our budget. We're not moving. We're going to stay within our budget, and whatever you say on here, and that's what we're going to hold you to. Now, the time and materials, okay, let me go a little bit in that one so you understand what a time and materials is. The contractor is paid based on the actual time spent on that project, that's the labor hours, and the cost of materials used, plus a markup for profit. Labor rates are pre negotiated, all right, and the material costs are reimbursed, okay. So, the impact on the pricing. The contract type provides flexibility for both the government and the contractor, as the costs are based on actual hours worked and materials consumed. While contractors are compensated for actual costs, they must still manage labor and materials, all right, effectively to efficiently, right, to avoid unnecessary expenses, accurate time tracking of time, and then the materials is critical. All right. The contractor risk right here is a little bit lower compared to the firm fixed price because the government covers the actual expenses. So that's good for contractors as well because it's helping and you don't have to have the whole burden. You just have some of it. You understand what I'm saying? And so the key considerations for that is time and material contracts are ideal for projects where the scope of work is not fully defined. However, for this opportunity, it was fully defined. So that's why it's important to understand those things. But contractors must ensure, this is with the time and materials, that transparent cost tracking to justify billing to the government. Now, let me talk about the cost reimbursement, just so you're aware, because this is the basic foundation. So when you see these different types of contracts, you'll be prepared with your pricing. Now, according to the FAR, the government reimburses the contractor for all allowable costs incurred in performing this contract, plus a fee, the profit, that may be fixed or performance based. So that's why I always tell small business, don't be afraid of cost reimbursable contracts. It's in for your best interest, but you have to learn how to allocate for it because I'm telling you, it's complex. There's a lot of things that you have to make sure that you are tracking and everything. Okay, because that one that is the contractor incurs, right, the cost incurred in performing the contract plus a fee, but here it is, the government assumes much of the financial risk by reimbursing actual costs. So that means they're going to scrutinize it really because this is where they're assuming the risk. So that's why you mostly see a lot of firm fixed price contracts and a time and materials contracts and not as many cost reimbursable because now they're assuming all the risk and then that's going to add to their administrative burden. So now they have to go in and do all the things that we're doing on to make sure the pricing is right. They're doing it as well because they have to make sure that they're getting what they're paid for at a reasonable price and all of that. So that's why the cost reimbursable, because let me tell you how it impacts. Okay, this contract type shares risk between the government and contractor. The government pays for the allowable. I've already told you, but the allowable and the unallowable is. So be aware of that. So I will create a spreadsheet talking about the allowable costs and then plugging in those numbers for the allowable costs so that way you know it's allowable. Okay. And then, but the contractor must follow the strict rules on what expenses are allowable because they're strict on that. And contractors must ensure detailed cost documentation. And we've already started teaching you how to do detailed cost documentation. And then it has to be compliant with the FAR. Part 31 cost principles to ensure costs are reimbursed. So that's where you want to be aware of the federal acquisition regulation on what that is. And then the profit is often negotiated as a fixed fee or incentive fee, which encourages the contractor to meet the performance of cost savings, because it's all it is it's basically an incentive to get you to save, save the government money, get everything done at a reasonable time, at a making sure you're saving everybody, and especially the government, because they love those cost savings, because we are responsible for taxpayers' dollars. So when you can save, that is a win. All right, key considerations. While this contract type limits the contractor's financial risk, there is a significant administrative burden to ensure compliance with allowable costs and detailed reporting. And the way you alleviate some of that is to set up processes on when we have a cost reimbursable contract. This is what's involved. Boom, boom, boom. Having that checklist, those steps. So that way it becomes repeatable and easy to adhere to. And you're going to do the same thing for the firm fixed price and the time and materials. Now, the key takeaway: understanding the contract type is essential for developing the right pricing strategy. All of this that we're going over is so you know how to develop the right pricing strategy for this particular contract. For each contract, it will be different. Different hours, different requirements, different labor categories, different everything will be different. So that's why we can't always just say what we can do is give you a basis, and then you apply it for each industry, each contract, because it all is there, especially when you have a construction contract. That is, oh my goodness, that is completely different. So that's why we take our time and teach you those different things. All right, the firm fixed price contract requires precise cost estimates and carry higher risk for the contractor. That is for your small business. While time and materials and the cost reimbursable contracts allow for more flexibility, but require careful management of hours, materials, and compliance. So that's what we want to make sure you're understanding with those different types of requirements. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, because we got still a little bit more to cover. Okay, now the tips for developing a competitive cost proposal. All right, so I want you to understand how I came up with my assumptions. This is what you have to learn and understand when you're coming up with your assumptions, okay? So, what that is, and when I'm saying assumptions for these things, these are the tips that I'm going to give you. Is the labor and staffing, right? How I came up with that was I reviewed the scope of work and deliverables section, right? And then I outline each part. So if that was campaign strategy, content production, media placement, and reporting. Now, this naturally implies that I'm going to have a small team, right? A small skilled team. Now, who needs to be on there? Do I need a project manager? Do I need a creative content lead? Do I need a media and analytics coordinator? What do you need? All right. Then, once you have that, labor estimates are based on assumed team. So, say we have 3 people, right? That's when we're going to break it down. Or if you can do this with one. So, that's how I came up with my pricing, because I was making assumptions. All right, now personnel salaries are benchmarked against industry standards for media campaign professionals operating in Central America. So make sure you understand that. How you coming up with that pricing? That's why I was showing you how to come up with the pricing for those things. And then we know it's for a 12-month period of performance. So that's how we came up with the labor staffing. Okay. Now let's talk about the direct cost assumptions. All right. So when I came up with the direct costs were derived from those cleans. I looked at the cleans, and that was from 001 to 006. And by reviewing the required outputs and timelines, the campaign design for the months of 1 to 3, media play, and so forth and so on, because they told you, let's go back to it. When you went in here and the solicitation, they're telling you, okay, for what? That's the campaign strategy and work plan. All of this and then how much I'm charging. And that's how and you're putting that because you want to know how much your pricing is. And then you created those additional tabs that says plan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, how much it costs. And that fed right in here to the direct costs. I just didn't break it out because for the sake of time, but I wanted you to understand how we came to this. And then don't forget, you can also go in FPDS and search previous contracts looking for media campaign, or you can go into sam.gov, go into contract opportunities, same thing. And what I normally do is hit the advanced search. Oh, hold on, let me hit it for you. Advanced search. I'm looking for all the awards. So I'm looking for whatever that name was. And then the type I'm looking for is the contract award notices. So if I'm looking at the notices, so I can see if they have a media specialist or media campaigns in here, you see the award notices in here. You just click on that award notice and then you go to see, okay, say it was a media campaign and how much was it approximately for the base and all option years. That's another way of checking for how much the information is. But see, this is a new one. So you may not find any information for the State Department because they told us this was a new requirement. It wasn't a recompete. So that's why I'm giving you multiple ways to find information and the historical. And, by the way, Google. We love Google. We're typing, Googling messaging campaign, look at previous contracts at different organizations. So you can also Google as well. There's so many things. And then now once you decide how you're going to do your estimates and detailed cost, make a standard operating procedure. So first I go check the GSA e-buy. Second, I go check, you're going down the list. So you've made your checklist. I'm checking GSA e-buy. Boom, we checked it. This is what our pricing is. Because you're building your standard operation procedures so you get the same pricing every time. You get your BD person or your virtual assistant or whoever, the pricing specialist. This is what I'm looking for when you go in. So that way you can make an informed decision because you are the one who's going to sign that contract saying that we've done our due diligence. And this is what we're proposing this contract be for. Then you're going to put one in there. Say you like the Indeed find salaries. So go on Indeed, put where and then what. Okay. Boom. Do your search and put that information in there as well. You can PDF it, you can do whatever, and you're building your market research report to send to the CEO so they can make informed decisions. All of this is to make sure you're making an informed decision that's going to validate. Now, you didn't just come up with a random number out of the air. You validated that this was an actual requirement, the competitive range for the average. And then now you feel confident in your pricing. So you don't feel like, okay, say I won this contract, I can perform now because I made sure that I put a cost. Now, mind you, got to find that financial health because say you don't get paid for the first 2 or 3 months because they setting up your invoicing, something happened. You know how it is when it first gets started. And then when you finally start getting paid, boom, you're good. You see what I'm saying? So this is how you do that. And then you got next on the checklist is the FPDS. We went in there, we didn't find anything. And then you make a note. We checked FPDS and there was nothing in there. We checked sam.gov. There was no same, but they were similar. And this is what we saw. Boom, 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 boom. Now, when you give it to the CEO, the business owner, they feel, oh, yes, they done did their due diligence. I feel good with this pricing. Let's move on. We're going to bid on this. Or no, it's not enough. We're not going to make any money. This is going to hurt us. And then we're going to put no bid, boom, put it in the file. And we know why we did not go after this opportunity. This is all to make sure you're making informed decisions. Okay, let's get back to it. So that's what I mean when I talk about the direct costs and the indirect costs. All right. So that's the tip for that. That's how I did the assumptions for that. The indirect cost, the same thing. We talked about the 20%. Then the preferred performance. We already talked about the currency payment. And those were how I came up with all of the assumptions. All right. So now let's talk about the next thing. So before I move on to the next thing, I want to go back to the slides so we can talk about the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so now we're going to start right here because remember, we created a detailed cost estimate with the justifications, and that's where you're going to put all of your assumptions. So, say you want to make next to here, you want to assign different things. So that's why you can go to add, and then you just assign who you want to assign it to, the dates, tables. That's why I love using the Google Sheets because it's easily to assign, it's easy to restrict it, it's easy to go in there and add the data, and then say we want to make a note, and then that will be where they add their remarks or comments, and then we can review those marks and comments in that section. Okay, so now we've assigned. Oh, I put that in the wrong one. Okay, let me put it down here. This is for assigned too, because you got different people working on different things who only have authorization to be in this folder that you've created for the pricing. Only put those people that are needed in there. All right, so now that we've thoroughly read the RFP and the regulation, everything, we know that. We went through and line by line created a checklist of all the cost related requirements via the labor categories, travel policies, material specifications, etc. Now we want to apply all those things and then do that detailed breakdown that I was telling you, hit those different buttons and create those different breakdowns so that way you know that you're definitely confident in then your role. So that way, I don't want to prolong that anymore, but I wanted to make sure you understood why that was important because you got to be able to justify the cost. Okay. So now we can justify the cost. And the last thing before we move to the last portion of our slide, preparing for your session. All right, because we want to give time. I don't know if we're going to even have many questions because from the last training, this is where we got all of the level of detail you all wanted to see in the training, and a lot of the feeling, I mean, really competent and really to be able to create the pricing. I heard a lot of good feedback from it. So I might not have a lot of questions for this session, but I want to make sure you understand all the details, all the level, and I don't want to prolong it. Okay, so now that we've talked about the tips for developing the proposal, the last thing I want to make sure I cover with is the action idle tip for the labor costs too. So when you're going in there, make sure what I did not talk about too was the insurance and all those different things that we talked about as well. So make sure that insurance is in there. Make sure, because I missed a few things when I was thinking about it, because I'm always thinking about the different things that go involved and all that. And as you think of things, write it down so you do not forget. Okay, so now we're about to go to the last little bit, and that's prepare for your counseling session. Okay, so what you do before you prepare for your counseling session, all right? You review your cost proposal template. So this is the cost proposal template that we created for you. Is you, because you're going to get this, is you have everything. So you show up in your session, all right? You scheduled your session and you show up for your session. So make sure that you've done this level of work before you when you show up for your session, because then the session will be proactive, I mean, and you'll be able to really get everything done. So that's the first thing you're going to do is review the cost proposal template. Oh, hold on, let me pause real quick because I see a hand raised up on here. Did you type your question in the chat? Did you need me to pause and type a question in the chat?
Yeah, please, whoever that was, sorry, I missed that. Can you please type
Mm-hmm.
the question in the chat and we'll answer it? Thanks.
Yes, yeah, because that just it blocked my little screen, and I was trying to make sure I don't miss anyone who has questions because I can pause real quickly because as we getting ready to close this session, this is how we prepare for our session with our counselor. So I want to make sure I've answered every question before I go into the last portion. This is how you prepare for your session with your counselor. Okay, so let me see. Did they have a question?
No, it hasn't come through yet. I'll let you know.
Okay, good. So let's continue to go. All right, so now let me go back to the slide so I can make sure we stay on the slide. So the first thing, you review the cost proposal template. So now say it's not a messaging opportunity, it's a janitorial services, or it's some different type, or it's products or whatever. You're going to use this same way to prepare for your session. You're going to have your folder created. You already have the information in. You're going to share that folder. All you have to do is share it and then give them, if it's restricted, and then you add the person that you're sharing this folder to, and that's your counselor, because you want them to go over and review. I can't tell you how many times we got in a session, they didn't know where the pricing information was, and we had to take time out and stop and look for it and so forth. And then that's just you took 2 weeks to get in, or 3 weeks or so forth on to get in for your session, and then you don't have all that stuff in there, and then that way, and then you feel frustrated, and now you're trying to rush. So what this is to prepare you for your session, so you're not rushed, so you're not feeling frustrated, and you come in feeling confident and ready to discuss some of the challenges you had with developing that. So in that folder, what you're going to include is, I always tell you to have your sheets. All right. You don't have to put the whole entire proposal in there. What I would recommend that you pull the sheets for the pricing, because when you looked in proposal level 1, and proposal level 2, they told you how to set up the folder. We talked about that. So this is going in the pricing section of that proposal. So when you put this in here, you put in the pricing. If you want to talk with them about the pricing, because what they're going to ask you is, how did you come up with this number? How did you come up with this number? Where did you get? And that's where this comes from. So you've uploaded a copy of how you came up with your pricing, your assumptions, your justifications, everything, because they might think of something that you missed, or it was some other information that you possibly did not think about, and then they will bring that up for you. So that is the reason why it's important for you to understand and prepare for those sessions. And that's why we made sure we added that to the slides, because many times people don't know how to prepare for their sessions. So that was important to us to really capture, how do you go into your session, what you need to bring into that session, and how to make it. So you've attached that, you went in on your pricing, so that way you can go over each line item and feel confident to go over your pricing. All right, so we've talked about that. Now let's go to the next portion of the slide. So now you've identified your roles, your labor category. If you go back into the slides, and we talked about the sample slide and the roles, because this is basically our recap of what we've went over today, because many times we've covered a lot of information during the training. And so it's basically almost feels like a water hose. We have just bombarded you with a lot of information. So that's basically what this is basically a recap. So when you go back to slide 11, I gave you on slide 11 the sample roles based on the scope of work, what I thought were the sample. But now, if you're a media expert and you know what is involved in this, then you already know, okay, we're going to need a campaign manager, full or part-time, and I was on slide 11, the creative director, but we don't really need a creative director. Maybe we just need a PM to manage this project for us, because we're performing on another contract. All of that is going to be taken in how you decide on those roles. Now then you reread the scope of work. All right, so then you go back in here. Let me go back in here. So you're rereading the scope of work. This is where I got all that information from. So let's go to the scope of work. You see, this is where I was getting everything from the scope of work and looking for. I went in, lined everything because I'm a person, I love paper. I mean, no, we ain't supposed to be printing out everything, but I print out stuff, go in there, highlight stuff because I'm using it as a basic. A little SOP I'm building, so when these different kind of immediate requirement comes back, then my team can go in my folder. After I did all my write-ups and all the little stuff, I scan it in and then put it in the standard operating procedures folder and then record a video on how I came with my assumptions, how I did this, how I did that. So whoever is helping me, my proposal assistant, they know how I came. And then they start understanding how I think, how I go through the information, how I came up with all of this. And then that way they can add to it. Well, I recommend we do this, this, and that. And then so you went through this. You see how I was telling you about the deliverables. That's the reason why we created the spreadsheet. And I just went in and made sure I answered every question. And we went over this in detail. You have to do in the proposal level 2. So basically you're just going in, building, and then they're telling you how you're going to. So I went and used that also as my method of evaluation. They looking at audit surveys, media, and all of this goes into your cost because how much level of effort will it take for this? The requirement, campaign reach, the messaging effectiveness, and all that. So that is where I went in and got it from the scope of work. Okay. Now let me keep going. All right. And then the next thing, let's go back to the slides. All right. So I've reread the scope of work and the deliverables, and then I draft my indirect rates if known, your direct rate if known, but you should know that because you went in, you took your time, you built your sheet, and you know what your indirect costs were because you went in and what the indirect cost was. Let me go right back, and that's going to be on slide that is slide 12. If I'm not, yes, that's slide 12, your direct costs. And then also on slide number, let me see, let me go back to that one. That was slide number, because I want you to look at those examples too, because that's the reason why we gave you the examples so you know. Slide 15, and that was the 3 major categories for indirect for this solicitation. That was the overhead costs, and that was the business operation expenses that support the project execution without being tied to a single contract. And the example I gave you for that one was the office rent. Okay, so let me go back to the slide so you know this is the one we're talking about, the indirect rates, and that was the examples that I talked about was the office rent, utilities, say you got internet, whatever, the administrative salaries like your HR, your reception, your office managers, and so forth and so on. And then the software subscription, that's the office supplies. And why it matters is failing to include overhead can lead to underpricing and cash flow problems specific for long-term contracts and heavy reporting or coordination needs. And that's why I had to go over this so many times because this is where we keep having the issues. And then the last and final thing as we get ready to close out today's session is write down your questions. I asked you when we first got started with the training to make sure that you're adding your questions in for each slide. So if you had a question on that slide, make sure you write down those questions. If you had a question for the next slide, write that down on your questions. So that way you always get your questions answered because then that might bring up another question. Okay. And then as we move to more training. Okay, the next training, we're going to bring it all together. That was the November 13th. That's going to be the contract administration. And then we're going to close out the year with how to navigate contracting and the defense industry base. Okay, because that's what the the new name they're calling it now is the in defense industry base, and I believe is GIB, the government industry base. I kind of mix them up because we changing so much because now that we fall under the small business of office programs, but I'm not sure if it's going to stay that way because of the new administrative changes. So just keep your ears to the ground and make sure you're doing your research, the federal acquisition regulation, and so forth and so on. So now I'm going to open it up for questions so we can get ready to close everything out.
Thank you, Akiesha. That was fantastic as always. Okay, so here's your opportunity to ask Akiesha any questions, or if you would like her to go over any of the information that you may have missed earlier on. Let's see, we have a question come in. Sometimes I feel like I'm shooting in the dark when it comes to pricing. Can you explain again how you determine competitive pricing for similar work?
So let me go over that real quick. So let's go back to the tools that you're going to use for the pricing. All right, so similar work. All right, but because we know it's a media campaign, right? So now we have to go find out all of the media different titles, if you will. So when you're looking in here and you're searching out your title, so say we know of a social media specialist, right? So then we're going to go in here and put the social media. Let me see, it's not popping up. Hold on, oh, there it is. So let's use this one, social media manager, because this is how I search everything, right? Because I'm trying to see what are they calling these titles that does what I'm trying to do. So I'll start looking in here, right? So then we know this is how, same and similar, right? If these jobs right here, I just want to get the pricing. All right. But then I'm going to go in here and look at the job descriptions of, so say, let's do social media again, because I want you to see me going all the way through it. So then I will go social media again. Okay. And this one said we did the social media manager. So it all ties together. And we can say US. Boom. So it tell you what it did for the year. So then to learn if this job meets that requirement, right? We know we got to do content creation. We know and this one is part-time. So we looking at for somebody part-time. You already know if you want to look at hourly, day, week, month, you go here. Well, I want to look at this to see if you're trying to figure out if it's the same and similar. So then I go in here, I look at the job description. I'm looking at, okay, what they all do, all that. Okay, so what did they ask us to do? Did they ask us to do photographing, content capture? It's basically you're just looking. What you use is the scope of work to see what they're asking you to do. That's why it's important that you break it out. You know what they're asking you to do. They're asking you to do campaign strategy and a work plan. So you go in there, and what is included in there? The objectives, the audience, timeline, boom, right? The messaging content. So basically, you're taking all of this and you're finding it in those job descriptions, so that way you know, okay, that's basically a social media manager, or that's a media specialist, all that. But it's a lot of, but because you are a media company, you basically know what the different roles are called and so forth and so on. Like me, I'm a contract specialist, so all I know basically, okay, they call us contract specialists, they call us procurement specialists, they call us acquisition analysts, they call us, so that is the thing that I'm looking for. And then I want to see exactly what's involved in that, and I'm gonna see if it match. Is it the same or is it similar? The same is, it's basically the same requirements, the same this, the same that. But if it's similar, it does about basically the same thing. And then I'm gonna also go look in FPDS. Now I'm gonna look in there and see if any contracts had did the social media manager. So you'll just go social media manager, and you're going to do that same thing in here. And then you're going to do the same thing. We're going to go in here and look for social media manager. And that's how I get all of my information on that. But I save the reports because I don't want to have to go back and do it again. So when another opportunity, I've already did this. And all I'm doing is validating, ain't nothing changed. You see what I'm saying? So that's basically how you find about same is they do the exact same thing. Similar is basically the same things involved in it, basically. Okay, I hope I answered the question.
Yes, she said thanks.
Okay,
So it doesn't
good.
look like we have any other questions. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and for Akiesha for giving an excellent presentation. I've posted links in the chat where you can sign up for her classes in November and December. So I suggest you do that. So yeah, pretty much it. So until next month, take care, everybody, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Okay, y'all. Take care. Bye.